In January of 2019, my husband was diagnosed with a brain tumor. It was in a completely inoperable part of the brain, and was told me had 6 months to live. He stuck it out and died in October, 3 months longer than he was expected to. He was always positive, and decided a few weeks after his diagnosis that he would write letters for our daughters for significant events in their lives. My husband was my soulmate, and the past few months have been difficult knowing I've lost him. We have 2 daughters, Mia, who is 21, and Imogen, Imi, who is 19. All 3 of us have become a lot closer since their dad's death, and we've all really struggled. My husband and I were together since we were children. Got married when we were 18, and we were approaching our 20th wedding anniversary when he passed. In February of this year, Mia got married to a boy she's been with for about 6 years. I absolutely love her husband, and he's been incredibly supportive during all of our grief. My husband wrote a letter for Mia to open on her wedding day. It's worth noting that my daughters were unaware of these letters. It was my job to give them to our daughters. Her wedding day comes around and I just can't bring myself to give her the letter. I read it and just wanted to keep it to myself. I had his handwriting and his words, and it felt like he was there, and I couldn't bear the thought of giving that up yet. I was fully intending on giving her all the other letters as the events happened. Last week, Mia and her husband bought their first home together. They'd been living at our home since they got married, and so had a lot of stuff to pack and move to their new house. Mia asked me where her important documents were, passport, birth certificate, etc. So I told her they were in my top drawer of my dresser in my bedroom. The only letter that was in there was the one I was meant to give her on her wedding day. The rest were hidden away. She immediately recognized his handwriting, and of course it was addressed to her, so she read it and broke down. She came and found me and started screaming at me, asking how I could be so selfish. I didn't really know what to say apart from the fact that I wanted to keep it and she could take a picture of it. Both my daughters called me an asshole and are convinced I'm keeping them from a load of their dad's stuff. My daughter received a bike from her uncle, my brother, on her 11th birthday. She was over the moon and excited to use it because it was on her wish list for so long. Days ago, I discovered that my husband reached out to my brother to ask for the recipient for the bike and returned it to the store, and kept the money for himself while my daughter was at school. The bike was at home. My daughter and I got home and she started crying after noticing the bike was gone. My husband was home at the time. He told me he returned the bike and got money in return to spend on something useful for us, since the bike was just there as a distraction and there was no need for it now since we're the dead of winter. I was aggravated and lost it on him, saying it wasn't his, didn't come from him, and he didn't pay for it, so he had no right to touch it, knowing our daughter's been wanting it for a long time, and my brother was decent enough to buy it for her despite barely having money to get him by. I told him what he did was theft and insisted he hand over the money to me so I could repurchase it, but he said he spent it on stuff for the house and doesn't have any money left now. But I knew about the money he was stashing away in the bedroom that he forbade me from tossing, and I took some of it and went out to repurchase the bike while he was out the next day. He found out and verbally lashed out at me, saying I should have never touched the money he was saving for himself, which isn't much, but I lashed right back that I had to so I could repurchase the bike he took from under our daughter. He explained that he didn't keep the money for himself and instead spent it for necessities for our home, but he was at fault for taking the bike in the first place and he was responsible for getting it back. He yelled at me for almost 10 minutes, then stormed outside and started smoking. My daughter asked why her dad was upset and that she no longer wants the bike if dad doesn't want her to have it. But I assured her that's not the case and told her she shouldn't feel guilty and to just focus on enjoying her bike. My husband hasn't stopped grilling me about how I disrespected and undermined him, and managed to make our daughter hate him after making him look like the bad guy. I again said he shouldn't have touched the bike. End of the story. He's called me thief and juvenile for taking money from his savings and being sneaky about it. My husband and I come from the same background. The only difference is that his mother isn't of that ethnicity, so he wasn't raised in the culture like I was. When we started dating, I helped him reconnect with his roots. This eventually led to him reaching out to his estranged father's family and becoming close with them. I think my mother-in-law has sort of held that against me ever since. Throughout the course of our relationship, She has made multiple comments about how she doesn't like the amount of emphasis I put on my heritage. When we told her I was pregnant with twins, she later said something about not wanting her future grandchildren to care about that stuff like I do. I've learned to ignore her comments because trying to explain myself to her has never helped. And I try to avoid conflicts whenever I can. My husband and I decided that the babies would have a first name from our culture, and their middle name would be a typical American name. My parents did the same thing with my name too, so it was just a continuation of that tradition. My mother-in-law ended up seeing texts between me and my husband where we said the middle names. But she assumed that we were talking about first names, so she went out and got the babies matching sweaters, with the names printed on the front of them. She showed the sweaters to me after they arrived. And I thanked her for the gift but didn't correct her on the fact that those were the middle names. I was sort of peeved that she had snooped through text messages to try to find out the names before we told her anyway. So I didn't want to give her their first ones on top of that. Last night when she was over at our house, she told me how relieved she was that we had chosen normal names for her grandchildren, and not a ridiculously difficult to pronounce name like mine. My husband asked what she was talking about. She repeated herself and he told her that actually, the babies did have names just like mine and he expected her to learn to say them. She brought up the text messages and the sweaters she bought, and then my husband explained our plan for their names. She got really pissed at me after that. Said I let her look like a fool for accepting the sweaters instead of telling her the actual names, which we still haven't shared with her, and that she'd be calling them by their middle names since that's what she knows them as now. My husband ended up asking her to leave. And after she was gone he said he wasn't upset at me or anything, but that he thinks I should have just told her she had the wrong info, instead of lying. My wife and I, both mid-30s, have been happily married for 9 years. We don't have any kids and don't want kids. We had the what if talk before getting married. She told me she would want to have an abortion if she ever got pregnant. Yesterday my wife told me she's 9 weeks pregnant. She's on the pill, but accidents happen. She said she wants to carry to term and give the baby up for adoption. Naturally, I was surprised by the news and her change of mind. I asked her if she considered getting an abortion. She said she had, but she doesn't want to because she feels a bond to the fetus. She told me she has been researching adoption and learned that the local adoption agencies only accept birth mothers who are okay with having an open adoption. I told her I wasn't really comfortable with this and asked her if she would have an abortion. She started crying and spent the night at her sister's place. She won't answer my phone calls. I'm uncomfortable with this for a few reasons. I was adopted at birth and my adoptive parents weren't the best. I know this isn't the case for everyone who was adopted, but I can't help but have a negative view about it. A few years ago I tried to find my biological parents to learn my medical history, but I couldn't. I was sore about it for a little while, but it doesn't bother me anymore. My wife is aware of these points. I just don't want to pass on my genes because they're essentially a mystery to me. I also don't like kids. My wife said she actually would prefer to keep the baby, but she knows I wouldn't want to. So she said having an open adoption sounded like a reasonable compromise. I understand why she thinks that, but I still don't want to have any biological children, regardless of how much / little I would be involved in raising him or her. My wife takes birth control for reasons other than contraception. If she ever wanted to stop taking it, I would support her 100%. I realize that I'm an idiot for not getting a vasectomy a long time ago though. It honestly never occurred to me until now. I think because my wife has always been on birth control and said she would have an abortion, I see now that it was irresponsible of me to not get one regardless. I'm going to get snipped. She and I talked, it was emotional for both of us, but no voices were raised. I apologized for putting her in this position by being an idiot and not getting a vasectomy earlier. I also apologized if she felt like I was pressuring her when I asked her to have an abortion. I didn't mean to pressure her, but I know words aren't always received as we intended. She said she felt pressured a little, but forgave me because she knows I was totally caught off guard. She apologized for having a change of heart regarding abortion. She said she was really surprised by her own feelings and hopes I don't feel like she tricked me. I don't. We mutually agreed that it would be good to spend one more night apart to really think. We've always have a strong marriage, and we're both committed to working through this, whatever that may look like.